November 1st, 2022, Takeoff was shot and killed at a bowling alley in Houston, Texas, after a private party to celebrate the birthday of Jay Prince, a well-known music manager and an influential figure in the Houston hip-hop scene. While the true details of how and why Takeoff died are completely unclear, whether it was an accident, a setup, or a cold-blooded murder, one thing is for sure. With Takeoff gone, the world of music has lost a true legend. The Migos were three close family members and best friends who started from nothing and went on to change the sound of both hip-hop and pop music forever, and Takeoff was a third of their entire sound. Without his calm, cool, and collected delivery and persona, the Migos would probably have never reached the incredible heights that they did. From 2013 to 2020, Migos were the sound of trap music, bringing Atlanta culture, language, and music to the mainstream stage on a level that had never been seen before. The rising commercial popularity of trap music has become a huge part of the American pop sound, and the Migos' ability to make massive hit songs over and over only made it happen that much more quickly. But none of that ever would have happened without Takeoff. But even more important than the #1 albums and the viral songs was the bond that the Migos had as people. All three of them were raised together in Georgia as kids and then later found international success together as adults. The Migos bond was iconic, and it was a huge part of why they were so well loved in the first place. An entire generation of kids, teenagers, college students, and music lovers all over the world saw Takeoff as a musical hero for his raspy voice and focused delivery that was wildly popular for almost a decade straight. Seeing the Migos rise to the top of the industry over the last 10 years and truly earn their success as rap legends makes Takeoff's death one of the most heartbreaking losses of an artist in recent memory. But what's even more tragic is that he was far from finished, having released an album with Quavo just a few weeks before he shockingly lost his life. This is the story of Takeoff, an amazing rapper who is both the most underrated yet talented artist in one of the most famous rap groups of all time. The story of Takeoff, an artist who deserved nothing but respect and whose name will continue to live on forever now that he's gone. Takeoff was born on June 18, 1994 in Lawrenceville, Georgia, a small city outside Atlanta. He was raised alongside his uncle and his first cousin once removed, who would later go on to be known as Quavo and Offset, the other two-thirds of the Migos. While Takeoff was the youngest of the crew by 3 years, he was the one who would later convince the others to start taking rap more seriously. Takeoff loved music from an early age, and he first started making beats and writing rhymes when he was just 12 years old. But Quavo and Offset both played football in high school, and early on they were much more focused on sports than rap. But while they were busy at practice, Takeoff would download beats from the internet and make homemade mixtapes all by himself. The story goes that when Quavo and Offset would get home from sports practice, Takeoff would play them his music. At first they didn't take him seriously, but over time they realized that he might be onto something, and eventually they believed in his vision so strongly that the three of them dropped out of high school together to start making music full time. If it weren't for Takeoff's early vision and passion, there was a good chance the Migos might never have existed at all. It wasn't long after that the three of them began hustling their mixtapes around Atlanta that they caught the attention of one of the city's most influential artists, Gucci Mane. Gucci became an early mentor to the Migos and let them record at his studio for free. He also showed their music to his friends Kevin Lee and Pierre Thomas, who would later become instrumental in the Migos' career when they signed them a few years later. The two businessmen were immediately impressed by the Migos' sound, Takeoff in particular. Pierre later told Rap Radar that Takeoff was spitting like crazy, and he was strongly reminded of Bone Thugs, one of the most influential rap groups of the 1990s. When Coach K and Pierre decided to join forces and start Quality Control Records in 2013, the Migos were one of their very first signees. Their first move was to team up with Gucci Mane's longtime producer Zaytoven and record the track Versace, which became their breakout hit. The Migos would truly begin to dominate the charts in 2016 with the success of Bad and Bougie featuring Lil Uzi Vert, which became their first #1 hit on Billboard. Although many people considered Takeoff to be the best, most talented rapper in the Migos, Offset and Quavo were always the much more visible members of the group. Takeoff had a much more chill and laid-back persona, which sometimes led to a narrative that he was being left behind. But in the infamous interview with DJ Academics and Joe Budden, he made it clear that he wouldn't tolerate disrespect, and it became one of the biggest viral moments of the year.
You say I'm left off Bad and Bougie?
What'd you say?
You say I'm left off Bad and Bougie?
Yeah.
Do it look like I'm left off Bad and Bougie?
Takeoff had some really memorable moments on the Migos' early albums. Songs like Cross the Country, Narcos, and Slippery include some of his best verses ever. But after a few years of major success, the Migos took some time to work on solo albums so they could come back with a new perspective. Takeoff's album The Last Rocket came out in October 2018 to major critical acclaim. The project proved that Takeoff could stand on his own as an artist, and many people to this day feel that it was the best album out of any of the Migos' solo projects. Peaking at number 4 on the Billboard charts and staying on the charts for over 10 weeks, to this day the record has almost 400 million streams. The Migos would then reunite for what would tragically be their final album, Culture 3. While it was initially announced in 2019, it wouldn't come out until June 2021. And while it wasn't quite as critically acclaimed and commercially successful as the first two installments of the Culture trilogy, Culture 3 was still a satisfying conclusion. The project featured some big hits like Need It and Straightening, and it proved that the Migos were still a dominant force in hip-hop after nearly a decade. But following the release of Culture 3, internal disagreements within the group led to an indefinite hiatus. In 2022, fans noticed that Offset and Cardi B no longer followed Quavo and Takeoff on Instagram. And shortly after that, Quavo and Takeoff announced that they were forming a separate group from the Migos, while Offset opened a lawsuit against their label over the ownership rights to his solo projects. It's still not entirely clear what led to the split, but in a recent interview, Quavo and Takeoff alluded to Offset being disloyal. They didn't eliminate the possibility of a reunion, but they did reveal that they had no further plans to ever continue Migos at that time. Quavo and Takeoff have been teaming up to release new music for most of 2022, including a fun, exciting track on DJ Khaled's new album, a few singles of their own, and most recently they dropped an album called Only Built for Infinity Links just a few weeks ago. Watching through all of their music videos and interviews from this year, it seemed like they were having a great time and truly enjoying the music they were making. And as always, Takeoff was highly praised for his lyrical ability and how much he's continuing to develop as an artist. He was a huge part of some of the new album's best songs, including tracks like Nothing Changed and Messy. In a recent appearance on the Drink Champs podcast, Takeoff admitted that he still felt like he had a lot to prove as an artist, despite his long list of achievements.
Time to prove it. Is that something you had in your mind when you was going in recording?
Oh, for sure.
Okay.
You know what I mean? Enough is enough. You know, I'm chill, you know what I'm saying, laid back, but it's time to pop it, you know what I mean?
And his words now seem chilling, as he would be killed only a week later. It remains entirely unclear what led to Takeoff being shot and killed that night in Houston. There are so many conflicting stories and narratives floating around that it could be months or years until the truth is revealed. But to start from nothing, running in the streets of Atlanta with your cousin and your uncle, your best friends, and to end up as three of the most influential rappers of the decade, Takeoff was one of the most accomplished artists of his entire generation, and no senseless act of violence will ever take that legacy away. And the most important thing to remember about him is that he wasn't just a character on a screen. He was a brother to the Migos, literally and figuratively. He was an extremely influential artist who changed the hip-hop and pop culture landscape all before the age of 30. The death of Takeoff is a shock and a major loss to the music community, and he will never be forgotten.